It's time for another steaming bowl of oatmeal, y'all.
This is a world premiere. This is a world.
Hey, y'all. So first of all, I've packed about as much oatmeal into this little bowl as I can. It's actually not that small. You guys have to remember I'm a gigantic person, so my hands are huge. So it's actually a pretty big container. And like I said, it's heaping full of, again, I don't know if you can see it, but steaming hot oatmeal. It's delicious. I don't think I've ever told you guys how I make my oatmeal. It's generally I use, just the rolled oats. I actually prefer the steel cut oats, but they're just too expensive. So I get the rolled oats that seem to generally be priced the same as like the quick oats, because I don't know, maybe they think quick oats are a luxury or something. But so I get the rolled oats. I usually get like the Whole Foods 365 brand. It's actually the cheapest that I've been able to find. If people know of other cheaper brands of oatmeal, please let me know. And then I put a little, raw sugar in it, or agave nectar. Yeah, I almost did say that word. Agave nectar. And then some cinnamon. If I have raisins, I'll put raisins in, but I've been having trouble keeping raisins around because they're also a great snack food. I haven't been talking that much about what I've been eating, by the way. So these days, I've been getting ramen by the case. I found a place where I can get a case of ramen near me for $6, which I don't think is the cheapest I could find it, but for me it's pretty cheap. And then what I end up doing is making a couple of packets of ramen and adding like a little peanut butter and whatever vegetables I can get my hands on. So I often use carrot and bean sprout. I'll stir fry some collard greens, like just flash stir fry them, and then heap all of that in there. And it just makes a really delicious and filling meal. So that's a tip for people who are trying to be vegan on a budget. Ramen is a great way to do it. They're usually really, really cheap. And like I said, you can throw in, and it's frozen, and usually I'm throwing in frozen vegetables, which I found are also pretty cheap if you can get them at the right place. Whole Foods has that 365 brand, and I can usually get like a huge bag of, like a pound bag or 2-pound bag of like frozen peas or whatever vegetable for, $2. So that's pretty cheap. It's probably not organic, but it's something to live on. And so, yeah, and then in the middle of the day, I usually have a gigantic smoothie that'll have the equivalent of an entire head of some greens, and then some bananas, and then some fruit. So, and then throughout the day, I usually snack on nuts. So I tend not to be hungry during the day. I don't know what I'm consuming by way of calories, but I'm guessing based on, like say for example, the size of this bowl of oatmeal and the sugar that's in it. I'm probably consuming somewhere around 2,500 calories a day. Maybe a little bit more on the days that I run. And, I'm still a fat vegan, y'all. I'm still a fat vegan, y'all. I hope I'm not, I'm not hurting the vegan movement by continuing to be a fat old vegan. But those of you who know what I'm referring to, probably those of you who follow me and know the other vegan YouTubers that I tend to associate with probably know what I'm talking about. But recently someone, called out an amazing vegan YouTuber and called them out for having a fat face. Whoever said it, whoever you are who said that, or if you guys know who said it, you guys know that that's the person that's bad for veganism, right? You guys know that that's the person that's bad for veganism. And it's a shame that that person doesn't realize it. I think there's a lot of people out there experiencing privilege who, maybe haven't given it some thought, or have given it thought and really just don't care. And someone accused me of calling people racist recently. In fact, it may have been the Vegan Cheetah who I've been like kind of praising, and people have had issues with that. But the Vegan Cheetah, I think called me out as someone who calls people racist if I don't agree with them. And I hope I don't call people racist. And if I've ever called any of you racist in comments or anything like that, I apologize. I don't condone calling people racist. In fact, I think I made an entire video about the fact that no one is racist. People do things that are racist. And if being called out on something that you've done that is racist makes you feel like you're being called a racist, then that's you. That's not me. And I also try to be very careful when I point things out as racist or white supremacist, right? I'm not trying to make blanket statements about people's actions or that a certain group of people even engage in this type of behavior. White people are not the only people who engage in racist behavior. White people are not the only people who who uphold white supremacy. Now, that's not to turn around and say black people can be racist. Now, I think in terms of the use of the word racist, yes, because people think of racist and bigotry and prejudice all as the same thing. So in that way, yeah, black people can be racist. But in terms of a system that, subjugates one race for the benefit of another, black people aren't in that position to do that. So, it's two different things. And name calling and not liking people versus the violent subjugation of an entire people are two different things. And I hope that if you're valuing those things as the same, then that's racist thinking. I hope I made that clear. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on that. Just where I am. Going to talk about a little bit about a couple of things. One, I hope that people have been following politics and just the things that have happened last week. We lost the National Security Advisor, Mike Flynn, because he lied apparently to the vice president, or at least that's the party line. I think we've only begun to hear about the truth in that story. Apparently there were some leaks. Maybe some spying that had been being done on the Russians. That was how we uncovered this news. It wasn't that, anyone had tapped one of Flynn's calls, but the foreign nationals that Flynn was speaking to, apparently they were being tapped. And so now it's out that the US has been tapping foreign nationals. So this is it's a big mess. And it led to us, the National Security Advisor, resigning, giving his tendering his letter of resignation, and it being accepted. There's a little bit of noise, y'all. Jack is kind of walking around trying to get comfortable. So that's one thing that's been going on in the country. Obviously, there have been protests all across the nation. Much of it focusing on the travel ban, which people are calling the Muslim ban. Not to be controversial, let's refer to it as the travel ban, but it seems to be disproportionately affecting Muslims, right? It's also affecting immigrants from south of the U.S. border as well. And so I don't know if folks were aware, but there was something called the DREAM Act, and during the Obama administration, people who were in the United States who were undocumented were urged to come forward to begin the process of becoming citizens. And this, I believe the focus was young people who were born in this country, but I'll include the details. But the idea of the DREAM Act was people would not be penalized for coming forward. However, with this change in administration, suddenly people who were promised by the United States that they would be led through a process to become citizens are now sitting in prison, awaiting deportation. Now, of course, in an administration that has already made its reputation as being the liars. That may not be a big deal, so we lied. If the truth isn't important, then the reputation of the United States on the world stage as standing behind our word isn't important. But in terms of the safety of American citizens, now, on top of being seen as violent, now we're liars. And that's a hot mess. So, apparently, Trump's pick for the Department of Labor was shot down. And we have apparently he's selected, I believe it's Alex Acosta, who definitely, as far as what I can tell, is coming to the position with more experience. But the fear is that he might be the perfect choice if you're looking for someone who's going to sabotage the Labor Department. So having someone who's has a little bit more political savvy might actually be worse off. Or I don't want to say worse off, but apparently he's shown a propensity for using his office to do things that are a little underhanded. Apparently back in 2004, when he was working under the Bush administration, he wrote a letter pressuring a judge in a state case about voter suppression. And he wrote a letter to pressure that judge into making a decision in favor of Republicans who were at the time being going to be, were under suspicion of voter suppression. And so, just to watch out in case you felt like, well, maybe Donald Trump is coming to his senses. Maybe not. Maybe he's just getting a little bit smarter, or maybe he's been smart all along. I tend not to write people off as being just stupid. I've done my share of mocking Donald Trump, but I don't think you get to be president of the United States with no experience and not be savvy in some way. Or someone was savvy. Someone who was part of that process is darn savvy. Donald Trump also gave his first press conference solo. And you used it as an opportunity to undermine the credibility of the press. And it's interesting because I hear a lot of people talking about the credibility of the press. And the truth of the matter is there are reliable news sources. And the president could be pointing out who the reliable news sources are right now. There are people who are reporting very fairly. I mean, if I've been following Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! And the other anchors on Democracy Now! Who give do what I consider very fair reporting. What they choose to report is another story, but the reporting seems to be very fair. I don't walk away from any of these reports feeling like anybody was being painted as a villain, including Donald Trump. And so, I'm sure Democracy Now! Is not the only news source out there that Donald Trump could point out as reliable. Actually, I think he likes Fox. He likes the folks at Fox. So Donald Trump. And then a lot of you seem to be, I don't know if to say a lot of you, maybe it's 50-50, or maybe it's like 60-40 or even 70-30, with the 30% really seeming to be put out with even the mention of the name that person, who I've been calling out recently for seeming to seeming to embrace a social justice outlook on their channel. It's very out of character. It's disturbing. Trust me, it's disturbing for me. I'm not exactly sure what is going on. But, you know, I watched this person's video today where they were kind of taking apart another person on YouTube who I don't want to name, don't want to shine any more light on, but for something that they did that had to do with maybe, you know, displaying some racist ideology, or at least not understanding damage that can be done when, you know, when certain types of actions are taken to reinforce ideas about the inferiority of a certain race in comparison to another race. And in a very simplistic way, which is probably perfect for that channel, right? Where people will just come in, they want to hear some drama. They want to see people get ripped apart. And to, again, use that platform to talk about real issues, to talk about racism, to talk about white supremacy. And I actually heard this person referring to things that I had referred to in a video about them, gives me the idea that they're watching the content. And that's, to me, is important. Does it mean that, you know, all of the horrible things that that person had done, okay, you guys know who I'm talking about, right? So, you know, accusing someone of trying to, you know, cyber sexually assault them, horrible, trying to, you know, tear down a prominent a vegan YouTuber, and, you know, accusing them of crimes, accusing them of extorting money from their viewers. You know, these are horrible things that need to be answered, and there is some repair that needs to be done for those things. But you also have to think about it in terms of the mind of the consumer. I imagine that most of the consumers on that drama channel have forgotten about those things already, and they're thinking in terms of right now, and what's being presented to them right now is a person basically proposing that the vegan YouTube community be more work through a social justice lens. That's what's being proposed today. Next week, it might be, you know, it might be back to business as usual. It might be back to being a shit show. And I won't be surprised if it's back to being a shit show. But right now, is there a way that vegans or others who are part of the social justice movement can capitalize on the fact that there is a little bit of attention on it right now? And the reputation of social justice on social media right now is mud. People hate the idea of social justice. And, you know, we're going to talk about specific examples in just a minute. But just to continue with this particular individual, I don't think it needs to be so much about who that person is, about that person's identity, as how can we in the vegan movement, how can we in the social justice community, how can we capitalize on the fact that there is a message that is out there that we can share with others. And how can we capitalize on the fact that now there are, you know, as of the last time I viewed, 10,000 or I think it actually had just, so it was maybe at 2,000 or 3,000 actually when I watched the video. But likely there will be, you know, there will be upwards of 10,000 people who are going to watch this video and hear someone talking about social justice and hear them being very specific and using their own experience as an example of what, you know, white supremacy looks like and how white supremacy manifests itself in our modern society. So I think before we write that off, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. There is a There is a great message in there, and it's typical, right? It's white-splaining. It is, someone repeating things that have been said by black activists, by women activists for years and been ignored. My channel, which I have to say I'm like really pleased at the fact that my channel has grown quite a bit for me, right? In terms of the size that my channel was just 2 weeks ago, right? To have, in the last couple of weeks, almost 400 new subscribers, because of this, right? And a lot of it's been attributed to, what's been happening with Unnatural Vegan, who I'm going to talk about in just a second. But just to close this thing out with this other person, please, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater, and let's look at how we can capitalize on, I hate to use that word, but exactly, how do we capitalize on a message that is now out there, and it's being heard by more people than were hearing it yesterday, at least in the vegan community, in the vegan YouTube community. Unnatural Vegan. You guys are gonna hate me again. I feel like I have to apologize to Unnatural Vegan. And I'm going to tell you why. And this in part comes from you guys too. No, I don't agree with her. Yes, I think she completely botched the definition of intersectionality and has a completely skewed view of social justice. And if any of you saw A Privileged Vegan recently, you'll see exactly how it was framed in terms of her new video, which is her new video, and I mean Unnatural Vegan's new video, being responded to by A Privileged Vegan, and her talking about, what justice means, and this idea that, there's some people who are going to fall through the cracks, and yes, all the horribleness in that. Yes, all of those things. I agree with A Privileged Vegan. I thought it was a great. It actually looked at the feminist movement, and I learned things about the suffrage, the women's suffrage movement that I never knew before. But I'm not surprised because of other research that I've done into the history of the development of race and racial attitudes in the United States. But Unnatural Vegan is on the other side, right? Unnatural Vegan is, it's not Unnatural Vegan's job to look at the world through a social justice lens. It's Unnatural Vegan's job to maintain the status quo. That's her job. And I've been calling her all kinds of stupid. She's not stupid. She's quite intelligent, and she quite deftly frames social justice and intersectionality as the poisonous instruments that they are, because they are poisonous to the status quo. They're poisonous to the status quo. So she has to defend herself. And I think, thinking about it this way. It seems to me that Sways lives a fairly comfortable life. I imagine if she encountered any of the issues that many Americans, and I'm not sure if Sways is even in the US, but if she encountered any of the issues that many Americans face, she would not be nearly so quick to judge social justice, right? She's definitely coming from a place where, like, I have enough, my baby has enough, my man has enough, we're okay. What? If we're okay, most people should be okay. And if we're okay, then you know what? I'm sorry, but somebody has to fall through the cracks, just like she says. And it's not going to be me, so it has to be them. Of course, she doesn't understand that when you're saying some people have to fall through the cracks, who gets to decide? And who has gotten to decide who falls through the cracks? But again, that's not for her to break down for her viewers. She needs to break down for her viewers, hey, look, y'all, if we want to hold on to what we got, regardless of how much excess that involves, we cannot let these people unite and find common cause. And intersectionality is is it a great way to find common cause? It is a great way to find common cause, because you can look at practically any number of issues and see where there are connections to be made, and that if the people who are facing forms of oppression, right, because there is a certain type that oppresses, right? And I don't want to say that it's a white person or a black person or an American or an African or an Asian person. I'm not going to say that, but there is a certain type in the world, right? And they seem to gather themselves in small elite groups to do their work. And they tend to work in conjunction with each other. And if we want to pretend that these groups don't exist, then I can start naming them, right? We can talk about Betsy DeVos and the fact that she's part of the Amway fortune, right? Right? We can talk about these. We can talk about these international companies that are engaging in these activities that lead to the dismantling of communities. And those communities tend to be communities of color. If you watched my video, yesterday, where I was talking about, not my video yesterday when I was at the school protest, right? We had, Monica, I believe it's Monica Lewis Clark, break down for that crowd how school closings and water shutoffs and foreclosures were connected. Right? The loss of jobs. These things are all connected. And then when you start talking about, the fact that Detroit, for example, is like right here. It's the biggest city like on the Great Lakes, right? Right here. Then you got Chicago on the other side. When you're talking about access to natural resources, there are a limited number of individuals who control all of the world's natural resources. And when you're talking about control of the resources, you're talking about everything else. Because you can't make anything without control of the resources. You can't drink without control of the resources. You can't live anywhere without control of the resources. And so, of course, to Unnatural Vegan, to Sways, it seems utterly ridiculous that you would connect all oppressions into one. And it's not even about connecting all oppressions necessarily. It's the way that those oppressions manifest themselves in our lives, materially manifest themselves in our lives. That we have to make connections. Because often there will be a handful of people who are making the decisions about these things, about the way justice is going to be administered. And it's not surprising that the same groups, because we become conditioned not to think about people in Africa, the fact that one in four Africans in sub-Saharan Africa are malnourished. It becomes just secondhand. We see those faces in the same way that those images of starving, skeletal African babies on the television have just become normal. We can see that, and it's like, oh, another one, right? And they're all the same. They might as well all be the same thing. In the same way, every chicken is the same thing. Every cow is the same thing. Every pig, they're all the same thing. And because we can think of them as these things that can be exploited, that can fall through the cracks, then, we don't have to do anything about them. We don't have to take action. But this process of turning sentient beings into things is a part of oppression that most forms of oppression have in common. So they are ultimately linked. They are ultimately linked. but they become linked as they manifest themselves. It's the way they manifest themselves in the lives of individuals. You know, this particular woman has sexism manifesting itself in her life in a particular way, through violence, through lack of access. So if your only exposure, as I believe is the case with Unnatural Vegan, if your only exposure to oppression is as a word that ends in ISM, then you think of them as a cluttered room full of things that don't make any sense to you. But if you live in that room, those objects take on different meaning. And so the closing of schools, lack of access to drinking water, lack of access to meaningful jobs, meaningful work, lack of access to food, life-sustaining food, lack of access to health care, living in fear of being foreclosed or deported, or violence, random acts of violence, and be those random acts of violence because of the level of crime in the community where you live, as a result of all of those things, or violence from the state. If you're living in that existence, all of those oppressions are linked because they all manifest themselves in your life. They're linked to the point that you can't even tell one from the other. So the idea of addressing the lack of food as your primary campaign when you don't have water, or addressing water when you may not have a place to live tomorrow, or addressing either one of those where your kids, you can't even trust that the place your children are being sent is a safe place. And let's, forget about the fact that they're learning anything, but that your children you have to send your kids to school. If you don't send your kids to school, they take your children. But you don't have a safe place to send your children during the day where you can trust that they're getting the information that they're going to need to live. So it's not a question of bringing all these issues together in some ridiculous way. It's the fact that they already have been brought together in your life. And you're living under siege of all of these things. And so you fight against all of these things. And there are some people who are better at framing the water issue. Some are better at framing the food issue. Some are better at framing the foreclosure issue. So yes, those people take the lead. But then we all show up at the water protest. We all show up at the immigration protest. We all show up if they're coming to evict someone from their home that day. Because we understand that we all have to be in these fights. And there may be particular individuals who are helping us to frame them and being our spokespersons. But they're all in the same room. We're all in that same room having these conversations together and figuring out how we can support each of these causes collectively. And of course, Unnatural Vegan isn't going to understand that. In fact, Unnatural Vegan might even be threatened by the fact that there are individuals working collectively to address these issues. And when she talks about, getting how tiring that would be, how hard it is to get someone to get involved with just one issue. Imagine being the person who is experiencing all of these issues collectively. And that's another thing. Unnatural Vegan doesn't even think in terms of agency, right? She thinks in terms of poor starving children, poor malaria victims in Africa who need us in our superiority to go in and work on their issue. right? She doesn't imagine that there is a world where those people whose children are suffering from malaria would love to have the agency, the access to their own land, so that they can farm for themselves and feed their children and educate themselves and get access to technology and be able to develop their own cures for their own diseases, right? That sense of agency does not even exist within the mind of someone like an Unnatural Vegan. She only sees those poor people as victims. But for the person on the receiving end of oppression, they see it in a completely different way and probably wish that we would get out of the way. Because one of the reasons that they don't have that agency is because their land is being used to make food for us, to throw most of it away in the trash. So I'm just saying, I don't know, man. Man, I made a lot of oatmeal. I may not be able to get through all of this. So, some other things. Thank you all for following the vids that aren't related to Unnatural Vegan or the other person who I'm not going to name because it makes you all so upset. I've decided I have so much footage because I've been going to these actions. I've been visiting these organizations. And I have so much footage and I don't know how to post it because I want to keep talking to you about the things that are happening, and I want to talk to you about the things that are happening on the internet. And I feel like these conversations, this conversation that I'm having with you now, really helps to frame all of those other things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just randomly posting, I'm going to call them, action updates, and I will try to keep those videos definitely under 5 minutes. I'm going to try to keep them pretty close to 3 minutes. And what they will be is I will just take you to the place. I won't frame it for you. I will just say, this action was about this. I will show you some clips from the action, maybe a little bit of a speech, and then I'll close it out. And that's how I'll keep you guys a little bit more informed in terms of the actual in the street activism that's happening alongside all this talking to you about things. Another thing that I didn't say about Unnatural Vegan, I wonder how many actions she's been to. Like, I wonder, how much work she does in communities. I don't know. I'm not saying she doesn't do any of that stuff, but whatever. But so look for those. Look for these action updates. And I won't necessarily call give the title, but you'll see on the thumbnail it'll say action update, and so you'll know that that's what that is. And you'll also see that it's like under 3 minutes or around 3 minutes, so you can feel safe. And my hope is that those are things that you can watch real quickly, like when you're waiting for the bus, if people still wait for the bus, as opposed to like this video where you actually have to sit down or just have it running in the background, right? So that's that. What else? I have a couple more things I want to touch on. Oh yeah, so all the new folks who've come and subscribed, thank you all so much, and I'm really loving the conversation. I know I told someone that I was going to actually read some of the comments, but there've been just so many comments now that I don't even know how to go through them, and I don't necessarily want to read just like the troubling comments. So what I might do is kind of a day where I just do comments, and that'll probably happen in the next week. I promise that it's coming. I think it'll be a great way to kind of, introduce some of the new voices on the channel. I think so many of you are so wonderful and have so many great things to say. So look forward to that. But also I want you all to know that I do regularly stream live on YouNow Sundays, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So tomorrow, if I post this today, that'll be tomorrow. It's a great opportunity if you want to talk about something. You just come on and you just hop on as a guest and we can have a little conversation. And depending on the number of people who are in the queue, we can limit that conversation. Often it's just 1 or 2 people who want to chat, so the conversation can really kind of go on. But I do, again, hope that people will do that. I hope that you'll watch the live stream. I'm trying to get Mrs. King to come on tomorrow. Some of you were asking, like, who is this amazing woman? I'm like, yeah, it's Mrs. King. So, Ms. King. So, I'm gonna be seeing Ms. King later today. I'm gonna try to encourage her to be on for the live stream. Yeah. That's what I had to say. This is a lot of oatmeal, y'all. I can't do it. But I made a big dent in it. Anyway. Yeah. Oh, I'm also thinking about kind of picking up on my Patreon. I have a Patreon, but I never link videos to it. I think maybe there are like 2 people who are pledged, but if you're interested in, if you like this content and you're interested in helping to support it, please do visit my Patreon. Visit my Patreon account. I think there's a link to it at the top of the page somewhere. I'll put a link of it in the description box below. Yeah, so anything that you can do helps, you know, make this possible. Is there anything else? I've probably skipped some really, really important things, but you know, they'll just have to wait till next time. So that's it for this video. Like it if you like it. Share, comment, subscribe. This is Reg signing off. Love yourself. Peace.
And I love myself. The world is a ghetto, big guns.